Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Jim Grisanzio from the Oracle Groundbreakers team, and I'm here with Jeff Smith, a distinguished product manager on the database team. And Jeff is doing a session at the Groundbreakers APAC virtual tour, which is taking place this week and next week. And let's hear what he has to say about what he's talking about. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim. Yeah, this tour is something like 11 days and
It's
100 plus speakers, and
it's insane.
it's an embarrassment of online riches.
It is, and it's in four languages. Well, there are sessions in four
I heard four
languages. All
languages,
right,
yeah.
so it's Chinese, Japanese, Korean, English, obviously,
Yes.
and 11 days, yeah, and like 10 categories of technologies, and so yeah, no, it's nuts. And this is just one. There's the Yatra tour in India earlier in the year, and it was EMEA in Europe
Yeah.
a few weeks ago. That just
Yeah.
ended.
The United
Um,
Kingdom folks just reminded me to submit my abstracts. I was like, yes, I can't wait. Um,
and a Latin America tour a little bit earlier. So
yes, and I think
I
Spain
think,
was this week too.
yeah, no, not too much, too much. So why we're here is that we have never met before live, actually, and so I'm trying to get new people to talk to, new people that I can meet. And I saw you on the schedule, and I said, "Cool, let's talk." And because you're doing a couple of sessions at this event here, and I see something about SQL, and then also something about RESTful web services. So, what are you talking about?
So I just completed today the first talk, which is tips and tricks for SQL Developer. SQL Developer is the kind of the de facto front end for the database. It gives you the nice GUI, and you can point, click, and type if you want, and interact with your database as a DBA, a developer, or just that person that gets data out to spreadsheets. And when you're in a tool all day, every day, you don't necessarily have the time to kind of sit back and crack open the manual and teach yourself the best way to use it. You probably use it the way you've seen other people use it. Thankfully, I do have that time to figure out the best way to use the tool. It's kind of my job. So this tips and tricks talk is kind of like really a 15-year journey of me trying to get to the most salient, nittiest, grittiest little things you can do to change the way you use the tool to have the biggest impact. And one thing I've noticed is developers have this deep urge to not touch the mouse at all cost.
It's
And
for
unfortunately,
so it's for efficiency reasons, right?
it's most definitely for efficiency reasons. Windows gave us the mouse. Well, Xerox or someone back in the day gave us the mouse, and we have a graphical user interface, and it's kind of hard to use these tools without a mouse. But really, a lot of my talk is, how to do things in maybe one click instead of 8, or even better, how to just use the command interface to get almost all of what you want. But yeah, we're lazy, right? So and we get mad when something takes too long or it's not fun. And so for this talk, for me, it's very fun because I get to have fun doing it. And I think people enjoy seeing it. And I've had people who've seen my talk 5 or 6 times, and I'm like, why are you here again? And they're like, oh, I just pick up something new every time I watch. So it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. I throw a lot of stuff people in a short amount of time, and I hope they pick up 1 or 2 things. So
Well, but I mean, it's actually a very popular thing. I mean, you were kind of joking about engineers and stuff, but every single engineer I've ever met in my life shares that attitude, and it's actually it comes from a serious thing. I mean, you're behind the keyboard for a long time,
oh yeah.
and you're focusing very deeply on writing something that matters, and the efficiency actually is a big deal. So you've been doing this sort of tips and tricks thing for a long time. I mean, it must be you're able to save people a fair amount of time here, right? I mean, you certainly accumulated a lot of these bits.
I've tried to measure how much time I could have theoretically helped the community save. It's very humbling because we have, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 million users worldwide. And I think the most I've ever had in a presentation is about 600. but I have some YouTube videos with a couple 100,000 views.
Wow.
If I can teach you how to save 3 seconds every time you go to do something and you do that thing 10 times a day,
Right.
it's a crazy amount of time.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can spend more time solving the hard problems, like figuring out how to squeeze out that extra 10 cents profit on a transaction online versus worrying about how to remove the tabs and adding commas in your lists for your queries and all that silly stuff. So, and another thing is it appeals to pretty much everyone that ever has to work with an Oracle database, because we all do different things, but they all come down to using the tool just in different ways.
I wish this type of thinking was more applicable to other disciplines like marketing. I don't ever hear marketing people speak this way. And I've been in engineering, I've worked in engineering teams and I've worked in marketing teams, and the cultural distinction is pretty significant on this particular issue. Making small, what you would think is a small savings, what you would think is like a trivial thing, can really be very, very substantial at scale.
It's much easier to sell the $1 million savings versus the dollar savings you do 1 million times.
Exactly.
We like the second. For me, marketing is a hobby and I love, delving into it, but yeah, it's a different universe.
Yeah. So also you were talking about RESTful web services.
Yeah. So the internet's a big thing now, right?
It is the thing.
Do you remember when 9i came out? We had the internet connected database. So we have all this amazing data in our database, and I could list off the customers that store their data there. But the things that we use every day, even as consumers, more often than not, that data is coming out of a database. And RESTful web services is just a fancy way of saying, how can we interact with the things that are in the Oracle database via the world's most ubiquitous API and method, which is HTTP. It's what allows us to do anything on the internet, thanks to those geniuses at CERN back in the 80s. So part of my team is responsible for the technology that kind of builds this gateway that allows you to speak the internet language, but on the back end, we translate that into SQL and PL/SQL stuff. So you can say, hey, I want to post this change to this record. And when it comes through the web server and into our stuff, we then go and talk to the database and say, hey, Jim wants to do an update. He's trying to increase his salary by 10%. And then our store procedure kicks in and goes, oh, well, Jim's not allowed to do that for his own. And it gives you an error message back.
I can't imagine why I would get an error message on
That's
that.
so mean, right?
It should just go right through.
But instead of getting like a ORA or a PLS error message, you would get like the web error message, which would be a 403 or a 400 something. This isn't allowed. Go talk to your manager or something. So that's a relatively new thing for me. I was the database tools point-click guy for my basically whole career. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, the RESTful web service stuff kind of presented an opportunity for something I could like do net new for me. Because I run a WordPress blog and I've kind of done some basic Perl CGI programming. I'm really dating myself there, like HTML3 based stuff, like tables, like HTML tables. But I never did JavaScript or CSS really, except just a hack. And definitely didn't really get into the nitty gritties of HTTP. I was like, this looks fun. This looks cool. And the nice thing is the technology is implemented with SQL and PL/SQL. So you don't have to be a Java developer to build these things. The more you understand how to use the database, the more powerful web services you can build with our tech. So I've been spending a lot of time just kind of there for a while. I was just talking to Oracle developers about how HTTP would work in a database, because you don't have this, this always connected stateful set of transactions that you're committing and rolling back. The way the internet works is you ask for something and it goes up and you get it back, and that's the end of your thing. So you're kind of always in this auto commit mode. But I think for the most part, the audiences I'm talking to now are pretty much up to speed on RESTful web services, and they all understand why you need those Oracle database. And now I spend a lot of time on, well, what's the best way to implement that and have a very friendly, predictable API. I mean, you can build these APIs, and if you don't build them in a friendly, predictable way, no one will ever use them, because they'll try something and then they don't get what they expect, and they're like, well, screw this, I'll just go build my own thing.
Right. Cool. All right.
Well, too much preaching there. Sorry. As product managers, we're programmed to preach.
So 2 talks, one is done and one is still to come, right?
So my time Sunday night, I think for the APAC, so many acronyms, for the Asia Pacific and the folks in Australia, it'll be their Monday morning. Right. 10 a.m. Monday morning, I think. The first talk of the day.
Cool. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to also talk about is I've been hearing more and more about the Converged Database.
Yes.
What is a Converged Database?
It's the Oracle database we all know and love, but we're widening our perspective a bit. When we hear Oracle database, I think we all think of that thing that Larry and co brought out in 1977 or 1981, based on how you want to look at the version 2 versus stuff, where it was just tables, and then we added, constraints, and we actually enforced referential integrity, and then, we introduced PL SQL, and people have been using it that way for a long time. However, the actual true engineers at Oracle, which I am not one of, we're at the same time building technologies into the database to serve other data requirements. So, back in the day, XML ruled the world, right? I mean, it was the way that we, shared data and dealt with data in a lot of different apps. Like SOAP and XML was the way things were done. And so the Oracle database needed a way to handle XML. So we built an entire XML DB product. And as well as in those relational tables, we had XML type support. So you could deal with those XML docs directly in your relational stuff. XML is what it is. I never liked it. I mean, it's easy to read, but it was always kind of fat, and it reminded me of HTML for some reason, but it kind of fell away, and SOAP kind of fell away. And then we had JSON documents kind of come in. JavaScript took off like crazy. And I think that was somewhat responsible for JSON kind of taking off like crazy. But if you look at a JSON document, it's kind of more freeform. It's easier to work with as a human, and probably also as a developer. And there's tons of libraries out there. I mean, heck, you can, I think even like COBOL, recent versions of COBOL, if there is such a thing, have native built-in JSON support. And it's also the way the internet works too. So when you're going off and using these APIs, and if you ever open up DevTools in your browser and you're seeing the raw traffic come back, it's coming back as this JSON stuff. So Oracle's no dummy. We decided, many years ago, that we needed that same level of support in the database. We have an in-memory database. So instead of having a JSON database, an XML database, a relational database, an in-memory database, a NoSQL database, we have a database that lets you handle all of those things. And we have a single SQL implementation to cover all of it.
I see.
And the beautiful part is, like I was talking about with the RESTful web services, those are implemented with SQL. So I can develop an API set and give it to developers, and they can post JSON documents at the same time as they're getting stuff out of a normal Oracle relational table, and they don't have to hop between databases. So you have the same security rules, the same performance optimizations, just the security alone. I mean, security is kind of important now. I think everyone kind of agrees. those same consumer groups that lock down access to resources and the redaction features that make sure, that Jeff doesn't get to see Jim's salary because I don't have that HR role. All of that applies across all of those different ways the data is being stored, and you don't have to build that yourself as a developer. So really the Converged Database is just us trying to better describe the benefits of Oracle Database and change the mindset of, oh, Oracle Database, that silly old relational SQL thing that was made 30 years, heck, 40 years ago.
40 years ago, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems from your description, it's modern, it's evolved. I mean, it's not what it was. It's a whole new system, I mean,
we've been innovating the Oracle Database nonstop almost since 1977. Yeah, right. Almost as long as George Lucas has been making Star Wars movies, except our releases come out more frequently.
In that case, the earlier versions were better than the later versions.
Yeah, I don't know how far I want to go down with that metaphor.
It applies to the movie. So
I'm sure they use SQL technology in making those movies.
Yeah, no, I was talking about the quality of the scripts and movies, and I lost after the first 3. I was done. But I'm an old man.
You know what? I keep giving them new chances to disappoint me.
Yeah, I did it. I hung on for 3, but then I moved on.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, we got a converged modern database. We got conferences going on here, and I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about your community interactions. I mean, you've been around for a while. You've gone to untold number of conferences.
I've been annoying people worldwide for many years.
Many years,
with my bad jokes.
Yeah, when we used to be allowed out of the house, and so talk to me a little bit about how the community has evolved over the years. Now, this could be really any of the communities that you've interacted with over the years.
Well, I remember back in the day, a conference would be populated mainly with DBAs. And so we became very accustomed to talking to DBAs. And when I was in the business of selling stuff, I learned how to sell things to DBAs. And that's still important. And I'm not saying DBAs have gone away, but now when I go to conferences and when I'm in the even online communities like Stack Overflow, that's a developer universe. Yeah. And thankfully, I was always talking to developers too. I remember trying to sell some product, and the developer is always like, "Hey man, Jeff, you sold us that third right click you showed us, but you got to go convince the DBAs because they control everything. We have to use what they use." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So I learned how to do my tips and tricks for the DBAs, and I'd get them sold too. But I don't hear that anymore. Developers are free to choose almost carte blanche to use whatever they want, and so they go like how the water goes. They take the path with the least amount of obstacles, which is why it's very important when I talk to DBAs, I like try to tell them, I was like, look, you have to learn how to say go versus no. When a developer comes to you for help, you don't want to be a gate that stays closed. You got to help them succeed. That doesn't mean that you don't try to prevent them from doing crazy things like not put security in the database, but be that person that helps them be successful as you're protecting the data in the database. And we keep hearing about the death knell of DBAs, and autonomous is going to kill DBAs, and that's a bunch of malarkey, if you ask me. I mean, people keep saying PL SQL is going to die and all of this stuff, and everything's going into the mid-tier, and it's all JavaScript. And this is degrees of truth in there, maybe a little bit, but the DBA's job has to evolve.
Right.
And if anything, we're all wearing multiple hats.
Right.
You're wearing multiple hats. I'm wearing multiple hats. I'm doing marketing. I'm doing product management work. I'm doing other. I mean, the DBAs have to too. I think data. I did a session on data modeling for Europe a couple of weeks ago. I had 700 people show up. I was like, what? I was expecting to be the most boring of the 3 talks, and I think I actually had the most attendees. And I was very happy, by the way. I was like, this is great. So I spent an hour telling DBAs, hey, so much. You have so much power. Like, you know how the business works. You know how the data works. You can help these developers build some really kick butt stuff. So sit in on those design meetings, and when they're talking about, oh, we should just throw in a JSON document, you can be there and say, hey, that works great up until this point, and then maybe a relational table makes sense. And thankfully, Oracle has a hybrid solution where you can have the best of both. Or maybe it's vice versa. It's like, hey, relational tables are great, but in this case, maybe a more flexible schema but I have seen a big change just in the makeup. Like you said, it's more developer driven. The DBAs haven't gone away. Their job scope has changed, and everyone's doing a little bit of both. DBAs are building RESTful web services, and developers are having to worry about security and optimization. So,
you said a couple of things that I just wanted to point out. I mean, really, anybody in this ecosystem, wherever their main focus is, depending on your ability to really recognize what's going on around you and your knowledge and your feature set, you have a lot of power. All right. You have access to incredibly powerful tools. I'm always fascinated by this. You get someone who's in tech, they have a lot of knowledge, whether it's coding or database administration or anything really. Give them all the tools now are so powerful, and an individual person, just one person, can do an enormous amount.
Oh yeah,
with the tools. And sitting in engineering meetings, I used to work in the Open Solaris project at Sun. I was around kernel developers a lot, and these are obviously non-trivial people. I would sit in the meeting and just sort of listen, right? And I'd say, man, these people are doing an enormous amount of work with the tools that they possess at their fingertips. It's just a powerful thing, and that's one of the reasons why I've been so interested in these communities, because they change rapidly. There's always new people coming in. The technology obviously is changing. It's providing new opportunity for new people, but it's also providing opportunity and pressure for older people to relearn, right? Because if you just hang out, the clock is ticking, and there will be a time where you didn't keep up,
That time where we did get to travel, last year was a huge travel year for me, and I had actually planned on doing almost no travel this year anyway.
Really?
Because I'm a person of extremes. When I get into something, I usually do too much of it. Exercise, collecting beer and whiskey, travel. It's probably what makes me good at tweeting and blogging and answering questions on Stack Overflow. I really get excited when I get that little reward pellet when I've pressed the right button. But I got to go to Poland last year to the Polish Oracle user group. What an awesome conference that was. I know, Jeff, people are going to say, oh, it's because they had beer. No, because I've looked around, and the average age of the people there, may have been like 28, 31, tons of women. And I was like, this is great. Fresh blood, new perspective. They see problems and solutions differently.
Differently, yep.
And it made me feel really good about being a member of that community. And my Polish is non-existent, and their English was amazing. So it was a really good conference. A lot of these conferences I go to, I feel like I'm talking to the same people over and over again. So when I do get to travel someplace exotic like that, for me, that's what I most look forward to, is apart from the sightseeing, is getting to meet new people and see if my old jokes still work.
So it sounds like this is something you really enjoy.
Oh, it's my dream job.
Really?
Don't tell my bosses that. I want them to think like I could leave any moment. I think I decided I wanted to work for Oracle while I was still in school. But I thought that meant at the time I just wanted to work with the Oracle databases. And then I got my first job, and I was able to do that. And I was like, you know what? I kind of want to go work for the company that builds this stuff. And it took a while. So I've been here for 9 years. So I'm kind of the new guy at Oracle. A lot of people you said you were at Sun. But so many of the people I work with have been here for 25, 30 years, which for me is crazy, because they could have retired. I look at the cars they drive. They could have retired a long time ago. They're here because they want to be here. They're very passionate, and they're still net innovating. We have VPs, people with VP titles, executive VP titles, that still write code.
Really?
Which I love too. It's cool to see, because they talk about power. I mean, I was here when we figured out how to do selects and updates at the same time without blocking each other, all that kind of stuff. And that person's still here guiding the development of the database, talk about the things they've seen.
Cool. Wow. It sounds really interesting. All right. Well, Jeff, good luck for the rest of the conference. And I hope to see you around in future conferences, but maybe we can leave the Zoom at home and or leave the Zoom here in the kitchen and actually see you live in person with high resolution.
Well, it used to be, I would look forward to meeting all these people on like places like Twitter. And then I would say, hey, I'd really look forward to meeting you in real life sometime. And a lot of people took me up on that offer, and I had no idea who they were, because their Twitter handles were like a picture of a dog and XYZ.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yes, someday, for anyone watching this and for you, I hope you can meet physically.
Maybe not in the near future, but in the future. So
when we're all hoverboards. Today's Back to the Future Day.
Is it?
Yeah, we're five years past where Marty's supposed to be able to have the Barbie floating skateboard. But we do have an autonomous database, so.
Yeah, and they didn't have it then, right?
We've made some progress, yeah.
Excellent. All right, Jeff, we'll talk to you soon. Be good.
Thanks. Cheers.